Yo, what's good, free world? This is Shank Radio, man. Behind the fences, in the trenches. I know it's been a minute, man, and these pigs have been fucking with us. They've been on us, been locked down, but not letting movement happen. There's been some issues, and I see kind of like the issues been going on all over the nation. Not only with this fuck ass shit that's going on in Iran, but also we had some prison riots and wars going on in Mississippi that have been kind of inflicting all of us. So let's just get into it, man, because I know it's been too long. Me and ECC have not even been able to link up, man, and we're going to go ahead and bring you something special today, man. Today we are going to be discussing an ideology in our nation called Icona. We will be debunking the ideas that Kingism is some pseudo-evolved Christianity, as well as showing why Kingism encourages the study or mastery of all religions. So here we go, unveiling the Icona.
I want to start off by giving you a brief explanation of where the term itself, Icona, comes from. Afterwards, I'm going to read to you the section, the passage in the KMC that is Icona or labeled as Icona. And then afterwards, we're going to break it down sentence for sentence and give you some type of a source to reference as to the origins of our authorship. Okay, Icona, to many of our surprise, is actually a name. And the name is related to Central America and the indigenous people of Central America. There are two books that can be referenced here that you can find yourself to show you what it is that I'm speaking of. The first book is by Manly P. Hall. It's called America's Secret Assignment with Destiny. Manly P. Hall was a 33rd degree Mason. And the other book is The World's 16 Crucified Saviors by Kersey Graves, who was also a 33rd degree Mason. In both books, they make reference to the work of De las Casas. And De las Casas was the preacher, if you will, in the Catholic Church, who was the first to report to the Spanish crown the atrocities that were being committed against the indigenous people by the Spaniards. In one of his travels, and it should be noted that he was also known as a historian, a theologian, and a sociologist, and a number of other things. And one of his travels, he encountered an indigenous person, and through an interpreter, had an interview with him in which he had asked him to teach him more about the religion that the native peoples believed in from where he was from. And in this interview, it was discovered that the indigenous person spoke of a father, a son, a virgin, and a number of other things that were relevant to the teachings of the Catholic Church. And being under the impression that perhaps the Spaniards had already encountered his tribe and basically forced them into the Christian religion, he encountered further and inquired into the names of these individuals. And when the names were revealed, they were revealed as such, and I quote, that they recognized and believed in God who dwells in heaven, and that this God was Father and Son and Holy Spirit, and that the Father was called Icona, who had created men and all things, that the Son was called Bacab, and that he was born of a virgin called Chivirias, who is in heaven with God. Now, the importance of this reference here in the work that we're doing today is multifaceted. First of all, the books that I found these quotes in, you had, again, The World's 16 Crucified Saviors, was written to show how the Christian religion itself is really just the latest or most recent adaptation of an ancient teaching of a Trinity. This teaching was taught in every continent, in almost every era, and a number of different civilizations. The other book, which was concerning Latin America and the Masons, the Freemasons who existed at that time in their fight for independence from Spain, and how they themselves were actually a part of a plot, if you will, an idea, a concept, which basically was Latin America would serve in contrast to North America as the true so-called melting pot, where the African, the Caucasian, the Mongoloid, if you will, would come together and create a single human being. That single human being later becoming known as the Latin American represents the nation in the fact that we are considered a Latin American tribe, but it also represents the idea of the nation, which is of unity. With that all said, I'm going to go ahead now and read the Icona, and then we're going to break it down sentence for sentence. This comes directly from the manifesto. Icona. The history of all hitherto existing gang feuds is the history of label struggles for the sake of clique recognition. It is this egotistical forceful recognition which leads to rivalry and senseless disputes, which often cost the high price of human life, the life of our people, the oppressed third world people. With the intention of changing this social and oppressive phenomenon, the King Manifesto was written to serve as a guide and to enlighten our deplorable conditions under the existing order of things. With this thought in mind, we proceed to create the new king, the moral king, the king of others, the lover of mankind, and the turning wheel of change. Devoting your life to the principles of Kingism implies a life of service to your fellow man. We can be of service in no other way. If you turn your back on your brother simply because of a label, you are turning your back on the Almighty Latin King's nation. One who does not know the Almighty Latin King's nation and its laws is like a plant growing in the shade. Although it knows not the sun, it is nevertheless absolutely dependent on it. The nation is in your hands. If you turn your back on the nation, you are denying yourself the sole purpose of your existence, the right to be free. With that quoted, we're going to break everything down sentence for sentence, and we're going to have King here read to us those sentences, and then we're going to build on them together.
And there's something that I want to bring up too that I know a lot of times we've talked about this Almighty Land King Queen Nation being a revolutionary incubator or a organization with revolutionary goals even almost, right? However, this is a whole nother side of the nation. This right here is starting to delve into the religious ideologies that we have. And although some of these are ancient, there's also ideas that are quite modern in our religion. Absolutely. So it's not something that we hold as divine, but this nation as a whole, to so many of us, is divine. This manifesto and this literature is what's divine to us. So let me go ahead and we're going to start breaking down this. I'm going to read a little bit, and then we're just going to build like how we usually do, man. The history of all hitherto existing gang feuds is the history of label struggles for the sake of clique recognition.
Okay, and that's the first sentence, the first passage that we're going to break down. What I'm going to point out here is that there is a parallel between these words, these opening words in Icona within the manifesto, and the opening words to the Communist Manifesto, which was written in 1848. In the Communist Manifesto, in the section that really breaks down classes and who applies to what class, the opening lines reads as follows: the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. And if we look closely back to what it says in the Icona, the history of all hitherto existing gang feuds is the history of label struggles. We have only two words that are taking place of each other. Where we use gang feuds, Karl Marx and Frederick Engels use society as being the existing society, and we're referring to the existing gang feuds. Where we say that this is being done for the sake of clique recognition, they turn around and say that this is the history of class struggles. But these similarities are not just concluded by myself. I didn't draw this conclusion solely and independently, but there are others as well. Primarily, I would reference the book written by what's the senator's name, man? He wrote the book. Where's that bibliography at? I got it written down somewhere. Tom Hayden. Tom Hayden wrote Street Wars, and Street Wars was all. Tom Hayden himself was a politician, but he was a politician that went into the streets and dwelled amongst different organizations, ours being one of them, and basically showed and exposed how the government was designed against us. Any attempt that we've ever made, street-level organizations, to do something progressive and for the community has been attacked by the government. And he exposed that in his work, Street Wars. But he drew the same conclusion that I drew, that these similarities between the Communist Manifesto and the King Manifesto are very relevant.
And, you know, I want to kind of build on this, the gang feuds and label struggles compared to Marx's class struggles. Mm-hmm. Right, because within these gang feuds,
Right.
and within these ideas and within these programs that have kept us feuding with each other, is kind of the same ideas that capitalism has always created, these feuds between these class struggles. So it's like these are these same struggles within the lumpen class. These same ideas that are keeping us separated are the same ideas that the world or these capitalists have used to keep the world separated.
Without a doubt.
The ideas that like the self-made idea that we don't need community, or the ideas that we within ourselves, these different stages of Kingism are even issues and even turned into feuds and civil wars within our own gang struggles, street struggles, and just the daily life of the lumpen proletariat.
Without a doubt. I think the Communist Manifesto as a historical document really is what introduced the defining of classes. And I think that the influence here in the authorship of the manifesto, our manifesto, the King Manifesto, is that we must understand what class we are in. And we hit on this all the time in almost every episode that we conclude, that we are the lumpen.
For sure.
And we need to understand who the lumpen are. And I think that is really what is being exposed or unveiled here, is that there was an influence in the authorship, of the King Manifesto. And in this sentence, we find that influence came from the Communist Manifesto.
And it's the opener. That is what sticks out to me so much is the opening line is telling you, check this out, man. Band together, lumpen, because we're going through the same things that's been going through since the 1800s.
Right.
It's just so modernized now, and the enemy is, the idea of the enemy is still the same, but the I guess the weapons that they use is quite different. It's quite advanced. All right, so the next line of Icona is, it is the egotistical force for recognition which leads to rivalry and senseless disputes, which often cost the high price of human life, the life of our people, the oppressed third world people.
Yes, and there are there is something here that we need to learn from, and that is basically that the authors concluded that this egotistical force for recognition, these gang feuds, which lead to rivalry and senseless disputes, and often cost the high price of human life, the life of our people, the oppressed third world people, is based on some form or perversion of the ego. This is all about recognition. This is what's being shared with us by the authors, that gang banging, gang feuds, this whole social and oppressive phenomenon that we'll learn about later is based and centered around recognition. And that is something that the lumpen suffer from, is a need to be recognized, because we are on the bottom of society. And on the bottom of society, we feel like nobody sees us, nobody recognizes us. And so we go through all these extremes to be recognized. And we know what these extremes are. We see them in day-to-day life. We see them amongst the culture of the lumpen. These fads that are extreme in nature.
And but I also want to take it to a step further, is, it's not just the outward or cultural fads, but even to be heard. We cannot just go up to Congress. We cannot go up to the Senate. So what do? We riot.
Yes.
We light shit on fire, man.
Yes.
And this is what they teach us to do, man.
Yes.
This is what this is talking about right here, that the human life, our people, the all third world oppressed people, the lumpen proletariats, we want recognition. We want to be heard. And we do it at any cost necessary.
And at the same time, let's differentiate between gang banging and political activity.
For sure.
Because the manifesto is specifically talking about rivalry and senseless disputes. So we know that gang banging, etc., is centered around recognition, but as well, because we are not recognized by the government and so on and so forth, we do go to extremes to be recognized there as well. And that is what is encouraged versus the gang banging and senseless disputes. The last thing in here, though, was that this activity often costs the high price of human life, the life of our people. And then it goes on to say that our people are the oppressed third world people. And a lot of times this is a question. If you ask a member of the nation, who are our people, 9 times out of 10 they're going to refer to Latinos. And the truth is, by definition, our people are the oppressed third world people, which includes Africans, Asians, as well as Latin Americans. And that's something that needs to be reinforced in our teachings, that our people are third world people. That's what this nation represents. That's what it considers our people.
And this goes back to that internationalism that we've always preached and always built on.
Yes.
So the next line reads, with the intentions of changing this social and oppressive phenomenon, the King Manifesto is written to serve as a guide and to enlighten our deplorable conditions under the existing order of things.
Yes. Okay. Very plain, very simple, very clear. With the intentions of changing this social and oppressive phenomenon, gangbanging, the King Manifesto is written to serve as a guide and to enlighten our deplorable conditions under the existing order of things. So it's telling us right now that these were the intentions of writing this manifesto, to change this social and oppressive phenomenon known as gangbanging or gang feuding or what have you. And a lot of us fail to realize that, because we are still to this day exposed and in some areas and regions saturated with the culture of gangbanging. But yet it says it right here very clearly, with the intentions of changing this social and oppressive phenomenon of gangbanging or gang feuding, the King Manifesto is written. That's something that we need to reinforce as well. And it's written to serve as a guide and to enlighten our deplorable conditions under existing order of things. It's showing us that we are oppressed people. This document, this manifesto is showing us that our people are oppressed, that we live in deplorable conditions.
And when it talks about the existing order of things, I think this is where it builds into the anti-king doctrine, the anti-king regime. You know, we have this choice to eventually become these revolutionaries, to become these new kings or these leaders of the lumpen. And I don't mean leader in the sense of a hierarchical, but just a speaker or a teacher to our class, because we all know that the lumpen is missing that idea, that teacher, that enlightener, I guess I would say. So where the existing order of things being this anti-king regime, this anti-king system, man, this is what this manifesto and our doctrine is for. This is what Icona is for. This is what Kingism teaches.
Right, to go against this system, because it is this system that has us under these deplorable conditions. First, a lot of us look at our surroundings and we think, you know what I'm saying, we're not doing that bad, this, that, and the other. Or maybe even compare ourselves to the rest of the world and say we're doing better than them. But the truth is, we are living under deplorable conditions on many levels. And it is as a result of the existing order of things. The United States government, the capitalist imperialist government of the United States, which is, by definition, anti-king. That is the anti-king system.
All right, so this next line reads, with this thought in mind, we proceed to create the new king, the moral king, the king of other, the lover of mankind, and the turning wheel of change.
Yes, again, very clear statement. With this thought in mind, the intentions of changing the social and oppressive phenomenon known as gangbanging, we proceed to create the new king. Okay, the manifesto is written to enlighten us to our deplorable conditions. This enlightenment, this awareness, is what leads to the creation of the new king. The new king is also known as the moral king, the king of others, the lover of mankind, and the turning wheel of change. Now, there's something here about this turning wheel of change that I want to stop on and build on a little bit, because the turning wheel of change is a metaphorical phrase, if you will, and it's referring to a revolutionary. And I'm going to explain how. If you look up a definition of a revolutionary, one of the definitions given is as something that revolves, something that goes in a circle. Okay, that is one of the plainer definitions of a revolutionary. Okay, something that revolves. The turning wheel of change, however, because there's another definition, which is someone who commits to political change, is a combination of the two definitions. A turning wheel, which is, by definition, a revolutionary, and a turning wheel of change, which is the political revolutionary. So, metaphorically speaking, the turning wheel of change is nothing more nor less than a revolutionary. And what it's saying is, with this thought in mind, the enlightening of our deplorable conditions, the going against gangbanging, the changing of that social and oppressive phenomenon, we proceed to create the new king. In other words, we proceed to create the turning wheel of change. Therefore, we proceed to create the revolutionary. Now, the turning wheel of change is actually something that originates with Mohandas Gandhi. And a lot of people are unaware of this. Mohandas Gandhi was in fact someone who influenced a number of sections in the manifesto. But I'm going to give you something that is a quote by him in an interview that he did. And he was asked about symbolism and a symbol for the movement and so on and so forth. The movement of his, which led to the independence of India from Britain. And he responded in saying, the spinning wheel, or the turning wheel, is not only the very symbol of passive resistance, but it is also a means of meditation. So we look at this and we say, well, that's kind of a vague reference. I can kind of see where the spinning wheel, turning wheel thing might be, this, that, and the other. But let me go further. And I'm going to go into another section of the manifesto. This section is called Fearlessness. And I know a lot of you are aware of what I'm talking about here, but not necessarily this connection. In Fearlessness, defined in the King Manifesto, it says, fearlessness is indispensable for the growth of other noble qualities. How can one seek liberation, truth, or cherish love without fearlessness? But then here's Gandhi, who existed before the Mani was written, before the nation was brought into existence, an almighty Latin King nation. And he says, fearlessness is a sine qua non for the growth of other noble qualities. How can one seek truth or cherish love without fearlessness? This is a word-for-word reference, correlation. Gandhi and the Mani. Gandhi goes on and says, fearlessness connotes freedom from all external fear, fear of disease, bodily injury, and death, of dispossession, of losing one's nearest and dearest, of losing reputation, or giving offense, and so on. And in the Manian fearlessness, it says, to the almighty Latin King's nation, fearlessness implies the absence of all kinds of fears. It is the freedom from such fears as hunger, humiliation, wrath, and criticism of others, etc., etc., etc. And here we go again. It is clear that at least in this section, in these portions that I'm making reference to in the manifesto, there was an influence. They drew inspiration from the work of Mohandas Gandhi. Mohandas Gandhi being the architect of the nonviolence movement, who a lot of us misconstrue as being a cowardice movement. However, if you were to study the work, if you were to study the writings of Gandhi, you will find that these people were the least thing close to cowardice as possible. They were willing to sacrifice their lives every day, and they did willingly, knowing that they were going to die this day. They would line up, uncles in front of nephews, in front of cousins, in front of fathers, in front of grandfathers, line after line after line, face British soldiers, and be mowed down with nothing but flowers in their hands. There was heaps upon heaps upon heaps of these dead human beings in the streets. Do I agree with that movement? Not necessarily. But do I discredit it? Not necessarily. The point I'm trying to make here is that this is also a movement that influenced and inspired the authorship of the manifesto, as well as we pointed in our work on the 3 stages, the work of Guevara, armed struggle. Both of these are viable. Both of these are viable for struggle and encouraged by the nation. And that's something that I'm pointing out here in this reference.
And so we're halfway through Icona right now. We're halfway through the ideology, and we've seen it pulled from a few different revolutionary doctrines, as well as now Mahatma Gandhi.
Yes.
We have not pulled anything out of this colonial Christian ideology, this white savior fucking complex, that so many of us are confused because of the Latinx culture that is raised so much under these Catholic thoughts, these Catholic ideas.
Right.
But nowhere in our manifesto have we seen any form of Catholicism or any type of other colonial type religion or white settler type based religion. And this is one thing that I want to keep bringing up, because so many of us are confused.
Yes.
That because certain parts of our nation talks about, the Tetragrammaton, and so many different parts of it talks about this, but nowhere does it talk about these Christian ideologies.
And nowhere in the manifesto will you find such references to the so-called Holy Bible. So far, we've touched on the teachings of the indigenous people, and we've mentioned Mohandas Gandhi. And for the record, Mohandas Gandhi later became known, and in fact in his lifetime was known as the Mahatma. And the Mahatma is basically the universal spirit, the Holy Spirit. he was considered to be a reincarnation of the Godhead. After his passing, there were millions of people who believed him to be the return of Jesus, the Jesus of Nazareth. And again, when we made reference earlier to the indigenous teachings, the story of Jesus, and if you reference the World 16 Crucified Saviors by Kirsty Graves, which I made reference to earlier, you will find that that is nothing more than the latest rendition of an ancient teaching of the Trinity. And what we're trying to hammer in here is that the Christian religion as we know it today is not, it's not something that inspired the writing of the manifesto. It did not inspire the teachings of the nation. It itself was something that was inspired by ancient religions and then later manipulated and perverted by colonialists, so on and so forth. And it has become a tool of oppression. And that's something that we want to point out here, as well as in other works that we're going to do. But here in the references to all the other work, the true work that inspired the writing of the manifesto, because nowhere will you find a quote from the Bible.
And I want to say, because this right here, and I think I like bringing this up because Icona is basically our most religious doctrine when it comes to the Almighty Latin King Manifesto, besides the idea of Kingism, you know, just the whole idea. So I just want to kind of build that if this right here, if Icona is pulled from so many different religious based or ancient religion and the indigenous religions, man, the authors of the manifesto made it quite clear why they kept this Christianity or this Catholic ideas up out of it, even though they came from the same culture we came from.
Well, I think too, you know, dealing with reality, we are way more familiar in common society with the teachings of the modern version of Christianity versus the ancient teachings. And so it's something that can lead through these references and these other works to the discovery that the Christian religion is nothing more than a perverted version of ancient teachings.
For sure. All right, so the next line reads, devoting your life to the principles of Kingism implies a life of service to your fellow man. We can be of service in no other way.
This one is short and sweet. You'll find in one of our prayers it talks about divine mission. When you go into the explanation of religion, it talks about the mission being human service. Our mission is human service. But human service is defined by different organizations in different ways. And what it says here is devoting your life to the principle of Kingism implies a service to your fellow man. We can be of service in no other way. So as a member of the nation, if you're interested in serving humanity, you need do nothing more nor less than devote your life to the principles of Kingism. Because by definition, exactly, by definition, this is what we believe to be our service to fellow man.
The manifesto is the turning wheel of change. You know, the manifesto has always been our revolution. Our revolutionary book, our revolutionary library.
Right.
If you the next line is, if you turn your back on your brother simply because of a label, you are turning your back on the Almighty Latin King nation.
Here again, short and sweet. If you turn your back on your brother simply because of a label and labelism is something that is highlighted in the manifesto. It's preached against. Labelism is something that we do not support, we do not encourage. Labelism is exhibited in a number of different fashions, whether it's by colors, by symbols, by nationalities, what have you, by gender, you name it. And in this respect, I think one of the main problems that the nation was dealing with, and a lot of street level organizations deal with to this day, in that area or that epoch and that period, was the internal factionalism, the internal wars that we were having with each other because he is from that chapter or he is from that state or what have you. And this is something that the nation had taught against very highly, and it has resulted in a unity within Almighty Latin King Queen Nation that is not shared by many other organizations of our background. And it's something that can be taught at this level, but it's also something that can be taught at the higher level, which is dealing with those topics such as nationalism, gender, so on and so forth.
And even partisanship. You know, there used to be types of there used to be almost different parties when it came to the Almighty Land King Queen Nation. Different chapters that were labeled as, you know, the Lion Tribe or the Tiger Tribe or these different Cheetah Tribes. And we went through the stages where we had these different labels and we had different type of kings, culture kings and bad boy kings.
Right.
But then it came to a head where we were constantly clashing with each other. We were constantly having civil wars just because of these labels. No other reason. Everything else, we believe in the same manifesto. But just because of a simple label, we were clashing with each other. And I think this is highlighted, man, about turning your back on your brother.
Yes, that is exactly what you're doing. If you're feeding into factionalism, if you're feeding into setism, and one chapter versus the other, and going against the ideas of unity within this nation, you are definitely turning your back on the nation.
The anti-king regime, man. There's so many ways they're trying to trick us. One of the next line. One who does not know the Almighty Land King Nation and its laws is like a plant growing in shade. Although it knows not the sun, it nevertheless absolutely dependent on it.
Okay. Now, this is one of my more recent discoveries. I always enjoyed the poeticism of this line. But I always wondered too, and I was curious and I inquired as to whether or not this came from somewhere else. Was this encouraged? Was this inspired? So on and so forth. And in my studies and in my research, I did find something. Let's see. This is a quote from a book, chapter 5, which is titled "What is a Baha'i?" And the book is Baha'u'llah in the New Era. And Baha'u'llah in the New Era was written by J.E. Esselmont. And whether it's coincidental or not, it was written in the state of Illinois. And this particular movement was highly concentrated in the city of Chicago, the motherland, where we as well come from. And that is of note. But let me read the quote in itself. Okay, from the book Baha'u'llah in the New Era, it says, "One who does not know God's messengers, however, is like a plant growing in the shade. Although it knows not the sun, it is nevertheless absolutely dependent on it."
Word for word.
Word for word, with one exception. And that is, in place of the Almighty Latin King Nation and its laws, it says God's messengers. But if you take the one and put it into the other, you have the same thing. And basically, if you look at it in another light, the Almighty Latin King's Nation and its laws serves as God's messenger. This nation and the laws, the King Manifesto, is the message. This is the guide and the inspiration that it talked about earlier. Okay. However, who is, you know what I'm saying, the Baha'i? Who is Baha'u'llah? What is this? Where does this come from? And that's something to point out as well. Baha'u'llah was considered to be a prophet. All right. He was a prophet of a religion that started in Persia, within the midst of the Muslims. And his religion was a religion that taught of one world religion. A religion that included all the world teachings in one. It was a religion that in many respects mirrored or reflected the teachings and beliefs of the Almighty Latin King Queen Nation. Another quote I'd like to put in here, it says, Baha'u'llah, like all previous prophets, proclaimed this truth and taught that in order to establish the kingdom of God in the world, it must first be established in the hearts of men. There's another place in the King Manifesto that we can go to, and in the King Manifesto it says, in order to establish the kingdom of freedom in the world, it must first be established in the hearts of men. So here it is again, we have another reference. Another quote that mirrors something that came previously. And there's a reason why this keeps happening. Because these are the sources. What is in these documents, these bodies of literature, are sources of inspiration. There's something in there that the authors of the King Manifesto want us to learn. When we learn about this one world religion, this universal religion, we are encouraged not to embrace one form, whether it's Christian, Muslim, or the other, but to embrace, to study, and even to master all of them.
And I think too that our quote-unquote religious ideas when it comes to the nation constantly mirror our political ones too. You know, where this is teaching of a internationalist type religious faction where everyone is invited, where everyone is allowed to I guess, feed from this fountain. That's what this manifesto is supposed to be about as well, man. Where all people are allowed to feed from this fountain.
Yes, without a doubt. I'd like to make a couple more quotes here, just to kind of show that this isn't just coincidental. Another quote from the book Baha'u'llah and the New Era. To be a Baha'i simply means to love all the world, to love humanity and to try to serve it, to work for universal peace and universal brotherhood. This universal brotherhood, this universal peace is spoken in the manifesto. The manifesto says, the king that lives his life according to the teachings of this nation is the true king, a king who loves his nation, his people, and his freedom. One that works for universal freedom and universal brotherhood. Another one, Baha'u'llah and the New Era. The man who lives the life according to the teachings of the Baha'u'llah is already a Baha'i. On the other hand, a man may call himself a Baha'i for 50 years, and if he does not live the life, he is not a Baha'i. An ugly man may call himself handsome, but he deceives no one. And a black man may call himself white, yet he deceives no one, not even himself. And the manifesto says a man may call himself a king, just as an ugly man may call himself handsome. Yet if he does not live the life of a true king, he is not a king. And an ugly man deceives no one. This is not coincidental.
For sure it's not.
This is inspirational. There's something that can be learned from the study of this Baha'i, this Baha'u'llah and his religion. This idea and concept of a universal religion, a universal brotherhood, the brotherhood of man that Malcolm X spoke of.
That turning wheel of change.
The turning wheel of change. This is something that you can learn. And again, not to embrace this one particular aspect of world religion, but to learn from it, to master it, and to see that this is what the nation itself as a religion is supportive of. One world religion, one people, one unity, one brotherhood.
Internationalism, baby. All right, so the last line of Icona. The nation is in your hands. If you turn your back on the nation, you are denying yourself the sole purpose of your existence, the right to be free.
And, you know, one of the things I hit in the old work of mine, King Solomon's 120, is that the question, what is the sole purpose of your existence? And it tells us right here in the manifesto. It tells us right here in the manifesto, the sole purpose of your existence is the right to be free. If you did not know why it is that you exist, the sole purpose of your existence, according to the teaching of this nation, is the right to be free. That is what this is about. We are always going against oppression under any system, whether capitalist, imperialist, whether a socialist, internationalist. If there is oppression there, we as Latin kings, as Latin queens, as members of this nation are opposed to it. The right to be free, that is the sole purpose of our existence. And in turning your back on the nation, what we talked about earlier, going against a brother because he's from this chapter, that, or the other, etc., being the turning your back on your nation. If you turn your back on the nation, you are denying yourself that sole purpose of your existence, the right to be free. If you go against the teachings of this nation, you're enslaving yourself. You're encouraging yourself towards slavery. And you're denying yourself the sole purpose of your existence, the right to be free. One of the things that we are hearing of recent, and as a result of the numerous raids against our structures in the street, is that the chapters out there are struggling with their unity. And here we go back into the 80s.
Yeah,
you know,
we're seeing labelisms and setisms
absolutely
again, man.
It's something that we suffered and overcame in the 80s here in the state of Florida.
And this is because of these fake ass indictments that are being brought up, man, where they're locking up 63 Latin kings, man. You know, this is these ideas that they see unity, they see a community of people. And, you know, we all know that we have to go back to who we are. We are the lumpen. So we know that within these environments, we do sell drugs. And we do partake in forms of looting and forms of oppression, fighting. But these are also ideas that we fight against oppression, right? Because in the grand scheme of it all, man, who's to say that I'm not allowed to put whatever drugs in my body that I want to, man? The only one person that says this fuck-ass government, man. Because they don't mind feeding us with these motherfucking pills and get us strung out, man. They don't mind fucking big pharma fucking being our drug dealers. But when we're doing in our neighborhoods, you know, it's not the most productive thing. However, it's part of that lumpen life. It's part of this lumpen ideas that we grow up with, man. It's the right to be free, I think, exists on every level, man.
And that in itself is a very intricate conversation. The right to be free, the right to make decisions, but also let's encourage the right to learn the consequences of any decisions, especially those that are designed to bring us down. One of the things that I wanted to highlight in whatever conclusion I had to offer is that the work that you and I do, the work that we make available to scholars, to students, to members of the nation, to the people, is a work that is you would be hard pressed to find anywhere else. And this work is in the spirit of human service, because this is our devotion to the principles of Kingism. We are elaborating on the King Manifesto, and we do so primarily for the people. However, somewhat exclusively, if you will, on some level or another, for the membership of this nation. And here in this state, who will be the obvious ones to have their first hands on the work that we do, we strongly encourage you out there to learn from our struggles, to learn from the efforts and the consequences that we've had to pay. Learn through the words that we are expressing and we are sharing with you out there. Whatever it is whatever struggles that we come against by the government itself are big enough. We don't need to be struggling against each other. We want unity. We want to hear that our brothers and sisters out there in the streets support the idea and the concept of unity and organization, because that is what this nation is about, amongst a number of other things. But in our conclusion, I think that in addition to what it is that we wanted to do in this particular lesson, we definitely want to as well support and encourage and inspire unity on all fronts within the Almighty Latin King Queen Nation, not only in the state of Florida, but throughout this country and throughout this world.
And also, I want to bring up too that this lesson that we just brought to you was already written by ECC11. This is an actual zine that is coming together, and I'm going to be pushing it as soon as I can. And I would encourage also, if anyone has any students that want this, and any universities that want this work, to just contact me. Also, if you have anyone in prison that you want to shoot this to, man, I'm begging that you shoot it to us. I'm also getting a couple of other our most recent podcasts. I'm getting them transcribed, because there's no telling what's going to happen to us. There's no telling what's going to happen to this phone. There's no telling when we're going back to the slab, when we're going back to CM, because this is the risk we take. However, like you said, this is our devotion. This is what we're doing right now, to bring these ideologies and these things that we've been building on inside of prison, and these ideas have been lost for a long time. And as of recent years, because of cell phones and because we've been able to network with people that had the same ideas, we're able to build now. We're able to create. And I guess I want to leave on the note that everything that we do, we're trying to make it forever, man. This is going to be our legacy, man. And we're just here, man. So I really want to encourage everyone, man, to please pass this information along, pass these podcasts along, man. If you ever have any questions, you could feel free to contact me. If you ever want us to speak to any classes or on any panels, man, contact me, and we'll try to make this happen.
Unveiling the Icona, my latest work, my latest written work, coming soon. It's going to be in a zine, like you said, much more intricate, much more referential. You'll enjoy it, and you will gain a lot from it.
Hey, man, so y'all be good, man, and you already know, man, we in the trenches, man. Peace to King Blood and our Brown Prince of Darkness. Amo de Rey.
Amo de Rey.